Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina istafa. Welcome to everybody who's joined us. We have some questions which have been coming in and we'll go straight to them inshallah. Ji.
The first question is it necessary to sleep and then wake up to perform tahajjud? I am still awake until Fajr, so would this classify as tahajjud?
Is it necessary to sleep and then wake up for it to be considered to be tahajjud? And the question is saying, I'm normally up at that time anyway. The short answer is no, it's not. The ideal situation for a person who's going to go to sleep is to wake up and read tahajjud then. That's better. However, a person who's not confident of waking up can perform extra rakats before going to sleep. And so as such, we could broadly categorize it into three situations. A person performs some rakats of tahajjud prayer directly after their Isha. That's an option. A better option is if they're not going to sleep directly after Isha, but they are going to go to sleep till Fajr, then they can perform some rakats of nafil prayer before they go to bed. And the third situation, and the best situation, is that they wake up and then perform tahajjud for someone who's going to go to sleep. But of course, there are those who stay awake all the night, and especially in Ramadan. You see, in Ramadan, when we learn about the ibadah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, particularly in the i'tikaf, the narrations suggest that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam barely slept at all. So the ihya and the keeping awake of the night in Ramadan, the qiyam of Ramadan, is through and through. That's the ideal situation. So it does not take away from the virtue of ibadah in Ramadan. And so you can confidently perform your tahajjud prayer at any part of the night. And so this is a sunnah, an important sunnah, of which you take whatever share you can read it with. His tahajjud, both are correct. Ji.
The next question is, if one removes both hands from qiyam position, does it invalidate your salah?
If one removes both hands from qiyam position, does it invalidate your salah? It doesn't, but it's contrary to the sunnah. It's contrary to the sunnah. And remember, every single compromise on anything, so without any good reason, our hands should not be moved away from the position of the sunnah. Sunnah gives completion to any action. Ji.
So, the question is it a specific number of Taraweeh you have to read, and can you read them in 4 rakat slots or 2 rakat slots?
Is there any specific number of Taraweeh, and can you read them in 4 rakat slots? The sunnah which has continued from the time of the Sahaba is to read 20. And this is a continuous sunnah over these 14 centuries. And they would be read in 2 at a time. So in principle, nighttime prayer is valid to be read in more than 2. 4 can be read. But the Taraweeh per se should be read as the sunnah is, as the ta'amul is, as has been the amal of the ummah from the time of the Sahaba. There's no reason to change that. And the full sunnah is 20. So if a person's done less, then they've not completed the sunnah of Taraweeh. Ji.
Does the first rakat have to be longer than the second rakat in Taraweeh?
The emphasis for this is, should the first rakat be longer than the second in Taraweeh? This is really in Fajr prayer. It doesn't have to be like that in all nafil prayer. So not necessarily. No, it's not necessary for the second rakat to be shorter than the first rakat. Ji.
Why are the Fajr prayer timings different in the Glasgow Central Mosque main timetable compared to the Ramadan timetable?
Why are the Fajr
timings
different in the masjid's main timetable compared to the Ramadan timetable? Because the masjid's timetable needs to be updated. There is a subtle variation from time to time and from year to year, and that has to be taken into consideration. So we do recommend and emphasize that you follow the one that's been published for Ramadan, and inshallah in time the perpetual one will also be upgraded and updated, inshallah. Ji.
Should a woman still be expected to get up and cook for her husband at Sahri even if she is on her period?
Should a woman still be expected to get up and cook for her husband for Sahri food even if she's on her period? Well, whether she's on her period or not, should she be expected to cook iftari? There's a difference between obligation and the kind of obligation which is wajib in sharia, in fiqh, and the kind of obligation which is a labor of love. Should a mother cook something nice for her children, she doesn't have to. It's entirely her choice. Her husband can't oblige her, but she might like to do that. So she can if she wants to. She doesn't have to, any more than she does if she's not on her period. Ji.
If I've missed a fast without an excuse or intentionally broken a fast, how do I properly make this up?
If I've missed a fast without a valid excuse or intentionally broken the fast, how do we make it up? You do qada outside of Ramadan. In Ramadan, you would keep the fast of the present moment. And once Ramadan is over, except the 2 days of Eid and the days of the Takbir of Tashriq, these are the days of Eid al-Adha, the days before and after. So you would just make up one fast for the one that's missed. Now the difference is, if you've missed a fast, though you shouldn't have, you just do qada and istighfar and tawbah for the sin of missing it. And if you've intentionally broken a fast, then you do also have to give a kafara, which is freeing a slave, which may not be an option for you, for us here. Or number 2, and this is in this particular order, you would keep 60 fasts consecutively. Shahraini mutatabi'ini, 60 fasts consecutively. And this is separate to the qada itself. So this is a serious obligation. However, if you've intentionally broken more than one fast, then you will still only do one kafara on behalf of all the fasts you've missed. A person who can't do this because of health reasons, because of some valid reason, not because of inconvenience, would then feed a miskin for 60 days or for 60 masakin for 1 day, and you can do 2 miskins a day, 2 poor people's food a day for 30 days and so on. Many people have this assumption that this is the first option. It isn't actually. So you might think that this is a mountain. You know, a person's iman can take a person to doing much greater things than this, and many have. The short days of winter are an ideal opportunity when your iftar is at 4 p.m. or so, and you close your fast at 6. It's just like missing breakfast and having a late lunch. So it can be done for those who wish to. So this kafara is separate to the qada. So one qada per missed fast or broken in fast, and a kafara for any previous fasts which have been broken intentionally. Ji.
It's a repeat question, Mullah Sahib. I think we should answer again because people are listening. So why is the Ramadan timetable a big gap?
Why is there a big gap in Ramadan timetable?
Between Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, between Monday and Tuesday, between the 5th. Yeah. Basically, it's because... Yeah, inshallah, in a day or two, there's a separate clip we'll be uploading relating to this. But in short, it's like this. Let us take this a little further. Let us assume we are in other parts of the northern hemisphere, the Scandinavian countries, Norway. There are parts of the world in which, during some months of the year, the sun doesn't actually set. It just circles in the sky. It goes down, it comes up, and it actually doesn't go beneath the horizon. So how do they perform salah? Well, they calculate, they do an estimation, they divide the day up, and they perform all 5 salahs. So what happens in Scotland is, at this time of the year, for the summer months, the sun does set, but the light does not disappear from the horizon. And so what you have from the 5th of May is a merger of Maghrib and Fajr time. And the start-stop time of Isha has to be established through calculation. And in these regions, in Glasgow and the surrounding regions of Scotland, traditionally we've done this in 2 ways, based on the expert opinion of scholars who are specialists in this field. Muslim scholars, number 1 is that you stay with the timing of the 4th of May and you keep it straight all the way across, a linear straight line. So you close your fast and read your Fajr at the same time for all the summer months. That's one option. And you can do this. It's perfectly jaiz for you to do this. And the other option, which has been printed over the last few years, is that because there's no true Isha time based on the signs in the sky and we have to do an estimation, the other opinion is that you take the timing from the nearest land, the nearest geographical setting on land, where the sun does set and the light does disappear from the horizon, and you can see the time, the normal signs in the sky for the beginning and ending of Isha time. And for us, this is in France. And that's how you have this big jump, because we're moving from the time which is observable because of true twilight to a time which is based on calculation. And then people are saying, why? Why just in Ramadan? It's not just in Ramadan. The reality is you have different types of people. Some people always perform Fajr during the rest of the year outside of Ramadan before sunrise. Most people do, in fact. Some people choose to read at the beginning time. So this is one element. So it's not something which is, it doesn't affect every single person outside of Ramadan in this way, because many people read Fajr at the ending time. Now in Ramadan, we have those, because it's a fard fast, not a nafil fast, we have those who would find it very challenging to fast at approximately 1:30, because they're diabetic, because they're on medication, because they're small children, they're school students, all sorts, young people who are entering into puberty and beginning to fast. And so there are all sorts of reasons why, where there's a valid, permissible option to make the fast shorter, this option should be given to those who need it. And the technical fact is, the technical point here is that it's permissible for everybody to do it based on that other calculation. Because the fuqaha say, there's no tarjih in this mas'ala. Tarjih means you can't give preference to one over the other and say it's a stronger opinion. Both are equally valid. Both are based on ijtihad. And that's the point here. So I hope this clarification is useful. Let me be clear here, there isn't a mistake in the timetable. And you do have both options, but stick with either one. Keep continuing to close your fast the same time as the 4th, all the way till the end of Ramadan. The 4th and the 5th, keep it the same to the end. Or go with the time that we've printed for the later time, and that's valid too, but don't chop and change. Ji.
What is the time for tahajjud these days?
The time for tahajjud is, you can read tahajjud any time between Isha and Fajr time. The preferred time is the latter third of the night, the latter third portion of the night. That's the best time. It's the same time as suhoor. So again, you'd calculate when are you going to read Fajr, and you just divide the night into 3 parts. Ji.
I've been given the following dua to get shifa from illness: 11 Durood Sharif, 125,000 Ya Salamu, and 11 Durood Sharif. Is this correct?
11 Durood Sharif, 125,000 Ya Salam, and 11 Durood Sharif. Is this correct to read for shifa? Let us understand that when it comes to ruqya and these types of awrad, there is a lot of tawassu', a lot of flexibility, in the sense that this is not based on a particular narration of hadith. It's based on people's experience and tajriba. So it's perfectly jaiz if Allah puts it into a person's head, and if Allah puts it into a person's heart and he gets it into his mind that he wants to read 1,000 Durood Sharif or a juz of the Quran. To read one juz per se is not fixed in the Sharia. You can read half a juz or a quarter, or you can read a random amount. There's no fixed amount, is there, in nafil worship? It's your choice. How much tawaf do you do when you go to Makkah? Do you do one set of tawaf, 7 rounds? Do you do 10 in a day? Do you do an umrah daily or occasionally? It's your choice. So in nafil ibadah, there is plenty of flexibility. And in ruqya as well, any jaiz recitation which you find beneficial is allowed. And so people have different experiences. And Ya Salam, Salam is a name of Allah, and Allah Ta'ala encourages us to use His names. أَيَّمَّا تَدْعُوا بِهِ فَلَهُ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى. Whichever of His name you call Him with, He has beautiful names. So by all means, sending salat and salam on Rasulullah is shifa for the soul and the body. So these combinations and these awrad, as long as you understand that they're optional, it's not something you have to do, and these numbers are recommendations by people who have experienced benefit reciting them in these numbers, it's perfectly permissible. Ji.
What is the story of Harut and Marut? I heard they were angels who sinned and are hanging in a cave as punishment for their sins.
What is the story of Harut and Marut? Now this is a tafsir related topic, and there are various narrations. Are they angels that sinned? Are they suspended upside down in a well? Personally, I found the tafsir of Bayan al-Quran, the tafsir of Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanwi rahimullah, which is not in English, to have the best and most satisfying explanation for the verses related to this whole event. So we could talk at length about some narrations which are related to Harut and Marut, But the specific point which we need to understand, and this is the important point, is thus. What actually happened is Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam had a powerful kingdom and he was a ruler of the whole world. There have been 4. 2 were believers and 2 were not. Nimrod and Bukht Nasr, they were the non-believers. And Sulaiman alayhi salam and Dhul Qarnayn were the 2 believers. And the 5th one is yet to come. And it's actually Imam Mahdi alayhi salam. So basically, what happened is when Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam's powerful kingdom was observed, the people of the time, some people from the Ahlul Kitab, accused Sulaiman alayhi salam of using sorcery and magic to run his affairs. And Allah Azza wa Jal sent 2 angels to earth which people could see and talk to. And this normally happens in human form, like Dihya Kalbi radiyallahu anhu, a handsome Sahabi. Jibreel alayhi salam would often appear before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the form of Dihya Kalbi. So angels can appear in human form. So Harut and Marut were 2 angels who came to earth, and they came to demonstrate to the people that Sulaiman alayhi salam is a prophet and he did not do kufr and observe faithlessness and engage in sorcery and magic. And this is clearly in the Quran. وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا, the section which mentions Harut and Marut in Surah Baqarah in the 2nd juz. So the point to be made is that if a person is accused of a crime and they defend themselves, they can only plead their innocence. They can only plead their innocence. And normally people will not necessarily believe a person's own defense. This is why we need witnesses, a third objective party that can come along and say this person is innocent. And this happened in the Quran. Isa alayhi salam became his own witness for his mother, but this is because it was a miraculous situation. The baby speaking from the cradle, Inni Abdullah, and the people understand now that Maryam alayhi salam is innocent. They were accusing her. The other example is Yusuf alayhi salam's story. And وَشَاهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِ. What happened is a family member of the Aziz of Egypt, the treasurer, spoke out. And some Mufassirin say this was a baby, which Allah gave the ability to speak. And the child said, إِن كَانَ قَمِيصُهُ قُدَّ مِن دُبُرٍ. If the shirt is torn from the front or if it's torn from behind, this is how you can establish whether Yusuf is innocent and Zulaykha isn't, or otherwise. And they saw that Yusuf alayhi salam is innocent. So a third party was made a witness in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam. So here too, who is the third party? If Sulaiman alayhi salam defended himself, people might not have believed him, because people who had the audacity to accuse a prophet of sorcery, they wouldn't accept his testimony. So Allah sent two prophets, 2 angels. And these angels, what they did to the people, they says, look, we know what sorcery is about. We have that knowledge. And we can teach it to you and demonstrate it to you. You know, we can demonstrate to you that Sulaiman is not a sorcerer, a magician, through the knowledge that we have. But we don't advise you to learn it. فَلَا تَكْفُرْ, because you may lose your faith if you study sorcery. But we are here as a witness. And we have that knowledge. We have that information about what sorcery is, what its nature is. So people went to Harut and Marut, and some learned that knowledge despite the disrecommendation. And they had been told, إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ, that Harut and Marut had been told to tell them that we are a test. If we give this knowledge over to you, then you will potentially lose your faith. So don't do that. But people slipped and went into that test. So the bottom line is, the important part of the story, which we can discern from the Quran itself, is that Harut and Marut came to establish the innocence of Sulaiman alayhi salam from any involvement in sorcery and magic. And that's the important point. And the rest is are narratives which around which there's a huge amount of discussion and debate. And so that's a short answer, and I hope it satisfies the questioner. Ji.
Is finishing the Quran necessary in Tarawih?
Is finishing the Quran necessary in Tarawih? It is a sunnah. It is a sunnah. And the word sunnah is used, remember, you may say the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't finish the Quran. Well, after that, the Sahaba did. And what happened in the time of the Khulafa Rashidin through their ratification is considered to be sunnah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself said, "Alaykum bi sunnati wa sunnati khulafai ar-rashidin." Follow my sunnah and the sunnah. Rasulullah is saying the sunnah of my Khulafa Rashidin, my rightly guided Khalifas. So to read 20 rakats is a sunnah, and to finish the Quran is also a sunnah. So if you can in your hafiz, then you should do. And on this point, let us understand the established norms of the Sahaba are sunnah. the established norms of the Sahaba are considered to be sunnah, and that's what we live by. Ji.
Is your namaz valid for women if you wear nail polish?
Is your namaz valid for a woman if you wear nail polish? Nail polish prevents tahara. That's the problem, because it's not porous. So your wudu isn't valid and your ghusl isn't valid. And this is why a lot of ulama emphatically disrecommended. One of our teachers of hadith, Mawlana Bilal, he's an expert, Damat Barakatuhu al-Aliyah, he's an expert in the rules of janaiz, and he's very, very emphatic on this point, because he gave an example of a lady who passed away. This is when we were studying hadith with him, the Sunan of Imam Nasai. He was teaching us tahara from the book, and a lady passed away, and they had to use nail varnish remover to remove the varnish from her nails, because she couldn't be given ghusl properly. And it's very difficult to do that after a person's passed away. So a person should avoid this. What is mentioned in the sunnah is henna, and this is natural henna. Nowadays, a lot of it is chemically made, and it can be very harmful, and it can harm people's skin. So this is acceptable, but nail varnish, the problem with it is even when you remove it, specks of it may remain on your nails, and even those that amount, when it prevents water from reaching your nail and washing, your tahara and your ghusl and wudu will be incomplete and invalid. So it should be avoided. And no, if you're wearing nail varnish, and is your tarawih valid? The point is about the tahara. If your tahara isn't valid, then your tarawih can't be valid. Ji.
Wanted some advice on how to greet non-Muslims during the month of Ramadan, and can we ask them directly to look at Islamic teachings?
How to greet non-Muslims during Ramadan, just as you do outside of Ramadan, with a nice smile and maybe a hi. Yes, and should we talk to them about Islam? It's about sensitivity. Dawah is something in which we need to be sensitive to the other person's sort of state of mind and how receptive they are. Everything that you do is a da'wah. When you walk about with the intention of being a symbol of Islam, every action that you do is da'wah. So your khuluq, your character, your mannerisms are all da'wah. Having said that, should you talk about deen? Absolutely, but not in a way that's sort of pushy, shoving it down someone's throat. Nobody appreciates that, and you know this point. If you speak to a Muslim like that, they won't appreciate that. So when it comes up, or when you can bring it up in a nice way, and the other person is interested, then you can gently say a few words, and that's absolutely appropriate. It will depend on the situation. And the questioner is asking how. Remember, Ramadan is an excellent opportunity to talk about faith. In fact, in these circumstances under lockdown, I think a lot of people, something has moved in their hearts, and I think people are searching, soul searching, and certainly it's an opportunity to talk about deen, to talk about faith, to talk about our long-term sort of vocation as human beings. So this is certainly an opportunity for da'wah, but this is something which ought to be learned. And the point is, it's like medicine, isn't it? Do no harm, the first principle. So never try to give da'wah in a way that's going to be counterproductive. Be gentle. May Allah grant us tawfiq. So this is a short answer. The point is, da'wah is something which needs to be learned. But the specific point I'm emphasizing is make a sensible, balanced judgment about when it's appropriate and how much it's appropriate to say. And then you can talk about various aspects of deen, inshallah. And you can talk about Ramadan and the pillars of Islam and the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, which is a beautiful way of opening things up. Ji.
Moving both your hands in namaz, does it break it?
Moving both your hands in namaz, does it break it? In principle, moving your hands, one or the other, doesn't definitively break your namaz. What breaks your namaz is moving them, or anything else, moving in a way that the fuqaha say that the onlooker considers that you're not in salah, and your salah is also invalidated by harkat kathir, al-harkatul kathir, excessive movement, lots of movement. Now, once the wife of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu was reading salah, and she made some movement, and Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq was so severe in his reprimand that she was about to break her salah. And this is because these Sahaba understood this point. They understood this point. His grandson Abdullah ibn Zubayr, his daughter Aisha's sister Asma radiallahu anha, her son Abdullah, he would be performing salah, and it was a time of battle, and a projectile passed through his beard and chest and ricocheted off the wall, and he didn't budge in salah, he didn't move. Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu. So to khushu, physical khushu is total stillness, not to flinch at all. Shaykh Zakaria rahmahullah, he'd be reading his nafal prayer, the duha, before Zohar prayer in the courtyard of the masjid in India. And our Shaykh mentioned this many times. He says the back of the neck of the Shaykh would be exposed, and sometimes flies would settle on the back of his neck, and he wouldn't budge. There would be no movement whatsoever. They would sit there. It's as though he didn't even sense them. So this is something we need to learn, to be completely still. And by the way, you know, the stresses that we go through and the complaint that we have of people's physical, mental stress and strain and emotional condition and health, well, if salah is to be the solution, then it's about practicing to calm ourselves in our salah, to be still in salah. And this is important. So khushu is wajib in salah, and excessive movement, I mean, it depends. I can only give you the principle. When the onlooker considers that this person isn't even in salah, and when the person in salah is moving excessively, then the salah will become invalid. And if they don't move so much, then it will certainly be makruh. It would be makruh to make movements in salah. Ji.
What are the fard of namaz? I've heard there were 13 fards.
What are the fard of namaz? The faraid of namaz, the arkan or the faraid, takbir tahrima, Allahu Akbar, to do some recitation of Quran, to do qiyam, 3, to do ruku, 4, to stand after ruku, qawma, 5, to do the sajdas, 6, and to sit in tashahhud, 7. These are the main ones for the length of the tashahhud. These are the main ones. Ji.
I think they were referring to, there were some before that, like your place of worship needs to be pure.
Oh, sorry. The question is about something I mentioned earlier, the prerequisites. Yes, the one I missed that day was clothing. I'd been thinking about that. So let me go through these for you. The prerequisites, the 3 things which need to be pure is your body, your clothes, and the place you stand. You need to be facing qibla. That's 4. It needs to be time for salah, if it's a fard salah, sunnah salah. 5, wajib salah like watr. And 6, you need to make the niyyah. And 7, you need to cover yourself appropriately. And that's separate for men and separate for women. And that's your 7. Ji.
Can a woman touch and read the Quran during her days of the month?
Can a woman touch and read the Quran during her cycle, monthly cycle? No, she can't. She can read the Quran without using her tongue, meaning with her eyes she can read the Quran, but she can't touch the mushaf because she's not in the state of wudu. And that's the short answer. And that includes wearing gloves. You see, many people think that it's okay to wear gloves if you're in that situation. You see, if you're wearing something, it's considered to be part of yourself. So if you were to, you had a pen in your pocket and you use that to push a page over, that would not constitute touching the Quran because the pen is not something you're wearing. So if it's something you're wearing, a garment, you can't use that. You can read with the eyes, so to speak. And if you're a teacher and you're listening to a student, you can make a short correction because you're not reciting a full verse, so that's not considered to be recitation. The other thing that you can do is you can recite the short surahs like قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, not as recitation but as du'as before you go to sleep and so forth. You can do that. And you can also recite the du'as of the Quran as du'as but not as recitation. But the normal recitation cannot be done in this condition. Ji.
Does your fast break if you use an asthma inhaler? I believe there are 2 views.
Does your fast break if you use an asthma inhaler? I believe there are 2 views. There are 2 views. The basis of this discussion is whether you swallow everything. You see, there's your windpipe which goes towards your lungs, and there's your esophagus, your gullet, where your food goes towards your stomach. And if you swallow something towards your stomach, then it will invalidate your fast. And the problem with inhalers is that, frankly, they can miss the target, and you can miss the target. If you're taking an inhaler and you take your inhalation at the wrong exact moment, how are you to know for sure whether a speck is going to go down or not? And that's why, to be cautious, the ihtiyat is that you consider your fast broken. There is the opinion that you breathe it in and therefore it doesn't go down into your stomach, therefore your fast doesn't break. But to be cautious, you should consider your fast broken. However, let me clarify. People say, well, people who are asthmatic ought to be able to use the inhaler. Well, they can if there's an emergency. If there's an emergency, if it's urgent, You can break your fast and you will not be sinful, but the fast will still be broken. It's two separate points. The permissibility is there of taking the medication when you urgently need to take it. But the permissibility is, the point here is, the permissibility is of breaking your fast. It's a bit like saying, if a person desperately needs to boost their sugar level because they are a diabetic, can they eat a little bit of something sweet when they're fasting? Well, they can, if it's urgent, if it's a medical emergency, definitely they should. But it will break their fast. So it's two separate points. So I hope that satisfies the questioner. Ji.
If a woman starts her cycle during her fast, should she act like a fasting person?
If a woman starts a cycle during fast, should she act like a fasting person? Yes, she should, and so should anybody else. If a person breaks their fast intentionally or unintentionally, in this case the fast is invalidated too if the menstrual cycle begins, you do need to behave for the rest of the day as though you are fasting. Ji. But the fast needs to be kept again as well. Ji.
Can Asr be prayed at the first mithal according to Hanafi madhab?
Can Asr be prayed at the first mithal according to the Hanafi madhab? Yes, it can according to Imam Muhammad and Imam Abu Yusuf rahimahumullah, but don't chop and change. Stick with one option and then stay with that. So if you have a necessity because of work or otherwise, then you can do. Ji.
What should one do if they lose concentration during Salah and couldn't remember if they'd completed 3 or 4 rakats?
What should one
continue or should they finish?
What should one do if they lose concentration during Salah and they can't remember if they've done 2 or 3 rakats? Should they continue or should they finish? They should continue. لا تبتدوا أعمالكم. Do not invalidate an action that you've started. We're supposed to complete it. And the Hanafi position is that if you start an act like an optional fast or an optional couple of rakats of Salah, once you've started, then it becomes a necessity to complete it. So you should not walk out of your Salah without a valid reason. Which one do you go by? You go by your ghalibul dhan, the dominant opinion in your mind. If there isn't one, you go with the lesser number. You go with the lesser number. And the first part of the question was, how can you gain concentration, wasn't it? Yeah. So by continuing to practice and by preparing for Salah and by removing anything which is a distraction. Do you know, it's makruh to intentionally allow yourself to be distracted. On one occasion, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after Salah, he removed a garment because of a pattern on it, because he found it to be a distraction. So this means phones should be off. It means that any sound, any distraction which we can remove, which is in our control, that should be removed. And performing wudu with khushu as well, with concentration, which doesn't mean spending ages doing it. And focusing our mind before Salah. And a person is given the reward of Salah when they are waiting for Salah. You're in Salah, mantadhartumus Salah. Focusing your mind before Salah, perhaps reading some nafals before the Salah if it's there's 2 sunnahs before Fajr anyway, before Dhuhr, before the sunnahs. So we can approach Salah, readying ourselves as we sort of build up. In tahajjud prayer, the hadith recommends that you should perform 2 light rakats of Salah before you go into your long rakats of Salah. And the muhaddithin, one of the reasons they give for this is because you might be in a state of sleepiness. In another narration, where it's disrecommended to perform Salah if you're being overwhelmed with sleep, because you might go about asking for istighfar and curse yourself. You might say something backwards, the wrong way around, and that's not meant to happen. So we ought to be in control of what we're saying. So it is important to get our faculties focused. I think, of course, this is a constant and lifelong mujahadah that each of us has to do to continue to work on our Salah. But if there's a constant effort and we don't give in, inshallah, Allah's assistance will come as well, and there'll be a reward in the effort as well. And when the concentration goes, you just keep bringing it back. Ji.
Can you hold the Quran during your Fard Salah or Nafil Salah?
Can you hold the Quran during your Fard Salah or Nafil Salah? I've already mentioned this in one of our first Q&As this Ramadan. Certainly not. And there's lots of reasons for this. Number one is that if you read from it during your Salah, and presumably that's why the question is asking, there's no other reason why you hold it, or you're following the person reciting at the front. If you read from it, it will invalidate your Salah. According to Hanafi fiqh, it will make your Salah invalid. Second point here is that this is not Sunnah. This is not the Sunnah way of performing Salah. We cannot, and this is an important point, we cannot enhance our ibadah by adding to it or taking away from it. The supreme way of performing any action is in line with the Sunnah of Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is the pinnacle of excellence. We can't get better than that. And so we shouldn't attempt to. And so the reason why people do this is because they don't know their Quran very well. Well, only today we were going through the tafsir of a section in the Quran, just after Surah Al-Furqan, and one of a mention came of the fact that the Quran was revealed gradually, and Imam Mahalli rahimullah, one of the reasons he writes for this, one of the benefits is that so that it could be memorized easily. And this is a point I've mentioned earlier. The Sahaba, all the senior Sahaba, were adults, grown up adults, many of them in their middle age when they became Muslim and they embraced Islam. And they learned the Quran and memorized it in their adult life. And so that's an example for us. So the reason that we want to be able to read the full Quran is not valid. We ought to memorize it and recite it. And the other point here, which I mentioned in that earlier session as well, is that when you hold the Quran in your hand, you lose the hay'ah, you lose the physical form of the sunnah ibadah of salah. You know, in salah, your eyes are supposed to be fixed in a particular way, your head is meant to be straight, your hands are meant to be in a particular position, your fingers. And there's so much discussion about where you put your hands, because the fuqaha want us to get it exactly right according to the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Where do you put your hands when you fold them? There's intricate detail here, and the subtle differences of opinion, because each is taking from various ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now you're basically losing all that virtue when you are insisting on something that has become very popular these days. And even worse, if it's your phone and a notification comes up, what's that going to do to your salah? So the whole idea is, if you think about it, alien to pure Islam. So why oblige yourself to do something which Allah and His Rasul isn't teaching you to do? So really, recite the Quran. What does Allah say in the Quran? فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. Recite what is easy for you to recite. And that's enough. Ji.
If you miss the azan in Jummah, is the Jummah still valid?
If you miss the adhan in Jummah, is the Jummah still valid? Interesting question. I'll have to come back to this one, Asim. And we'll have to, inshallah, in tomorrow's session, I'll come back to it.
Okay.
I'll answer this question then. Ji.
What kind of sign should you look out for when doing istikhara for marriage?
What kind of sign should you look out for when doing istikhara for marriage? Is this the only time you do istikhara? Most people, subhanallah. It's a long dua, and people have the sort of momentum to learn the whole dua when they're looking for a decision on a marriage partner. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would teach the istikhara dua the way he would teach a section of the Quran, meaning with so much attention to detail. The Sahaba will be taught istikhara. It should be used in all our affairs. This is one point, not just in marriage. The second point is, this is a misconception that we ought to have a sign after istikhara. True, granted, when Allah wills, He shows you a dream, but you can't demand it. A dream is a type of revelation, and Rasulullah himself was upset initially because of his love for Allah. He was concerned, is Allah unhappy with me, what's happening? And the mushrikeen were taunting when there was a big gap in revelation. And then eventually, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. After a gap of a long time, this revelation comes. And Allah Ta'ala says, وَمَا نَتَنَزَّلُ إِلَّا بِأَمْرِ رَبِّكَ. Jibreel alayhi salam does not descend except with Allah's instruction. So this is with Rasulullah. The Anbiya can't demand revelation. They can't demand revelation. وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ لِشَيْءٍ إِنِّي فَاعِلٌ ذَلِكَ غَدًا إِلَّا إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهِ. O Messenger of Allah, don't promise people who ask you a question, Surah Kahf, that was the context of it, that you'll give them the answer tomorrow, unless you say inshallah. Say inshallah as well. And this is the point. So Anbiya, so who am I and who are you to demand from Allah, oh Allah, you must show me a sign, otherwise I will not be convinced. Istikhara is not about demanding a sign from Allah, nor do we have that authority. It's disrespectful. Yes, if Allah out of His grace shows us a sign, then that's fine. So remember, if Allah wills, you may see a dream, and if Allah wills, you may have what they call sharh al-sadr, where your heart is contented and you can easily make a decision. But this might not happen. There are many senior mashayikh of the ummah who say they never ever saw a sign of this sort or had this kind of clarity after istikhara. Istikhara is for its own sake. You're simply saying to Allah, oh Allah, if it's better for me, my deen, dunya, akhirah, my present, future, make it happen. And if it's not, don't make it happen. And you've asked Allah and you've made that dua. Now, if it's a jaiz action, just use rational sense or mashwara and make your decision, and there'll be khair in it. And that's all. Don't make it overly complicated. And with reference to, Allah is with you, and He's watching you, and He's aware of your condition, and that's sufficient. So this idea that you must see a dream is not correct at all. Ji.
If a couple are saving together to pay off a debt the husband has, collectively taking into account the loan, there's no zakat, separate to the husband, is she liable? If she's not separate to the husband, is she liable to pay?
Okay, repeat the question.
So a couple are saving together.
A couple are saving together
to pay off a debt
to pay off a debt,
that the husband has.
which is on the husband.
Yeah. Collectively taking into account the loan, there's no zakat.
It's collectively taken into account.
The
The-
loan,
There's no zakat on the woman.
the loan.
There's no zakat on the loan.
No. So collectively, if you pool their money,
Hmm.
zakat isn't applicable because the loan value exceeds it.
Okay, collectively there's no zakat. However,
has enough wealth
Mhm.
to pay zakat.
Mhm.
But if they're doing it to pay off the loan,
mm,
does that absolve her or of her?
right, yeah. So the wife essentially is saying, because I'm using my savings towards my husband's loan, does it then get counted as one pot? It actually doesn't, because you're a separate entity. See, the loan is on your husband. The loan is not on you. And in Islam, men need to understand this as well, right? Women need to understand this. Sometimes there are other reasons why you need to understand this. Couples need to respect each other's wealth in the sense that they each have their own financial entity in Islam. That's what Islam says. So your money is your own money, and what you're giving to your husband as a contribution towards his debt is definitely a source of reward for you. And there's an act of kindness. But it's still your own money, and the debt isn't on your head. So therefore, it will not be deducted. So obviously, the amount that you are paying, that's something which is in one of your overheads. So that bit won't count anyway. So this is for a different reason. But the surplus after what you've paid will count. And I hope that clarifies the answer. I hope I've... Yeah, Ji.
My sister has cancer and it's spreading and she's really not well. I decided to build a well on her name. Is that permissible?
My sister has cancer and she's not recovering, she's very unwell. I decided to build a well in her name. Is that permissible? The first point is, may Allah Ta'ala grant her shifa. And I request all the listeners to say Ameen and make dua for her. May Allah Ta'ala grant her complete recovery. And may Allah Ta'ala put in place the means for her recovery. Second point, can you build a well on behalf of someone who's sick, or on behalf of anyone? Absolutely you can. And water is a very special type of sadaqah, because it helps people in their deen and dunya. It helps them in their deen because they do wudu with it, they do ghusl with it, they get their tahara with it, so it helps them in their salah, in their ibadah, and in their dunya because they drink it, because they cook with it, because they wash their clothes with it, which is their deen and dunya. So there's all sorts of reasons, and even the animals that will drink, it's a source of sadaqah. So it's a very fine form of sadaqah, and sadaqah is good for illnesses as well. It's a type of remedy, a spiritual remedy, aside from the fact that we ought to take the medicine as well. It's sunnah to take medication when you're ill. It's the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to take medical treatment. That's there. But on top of that, sadaqah also is a way of, a type of defense, if you like, from problems and calamities, which includes illness. So there's no reason why you can't do that on your own behalf or on anybody else's behalf. Ji.
If you don't remember Dua Qunut, you read 3 times Surah Al-Ikhlas and Witr Namaz, is that correct?
If you don't remember Dua Qunut, Surah Al-Ikhlas 3 times in Witr Namaz, Qunut, any dua or words to that effect will suffice. However, it's something which over time ought to be memorized. So it's really any dua in which you're turning to Allah or words to that effect, but we ought to learn the sunnah words of Dua Qunut. It's something which, because it's a slightly longer dua, a lot of people never really find time to memorize it. Recite it regularly off the page before your salah, and then increase the amount. Allahumma inni, and then Allahumma inna nasta'inuka, and then learn one line, learn another line, and then eventually you'll know the whole thing. Ji.
If your wudu breaks during salah, do you continue and finish it? Or do you stop straight away and do wudu and start from the beginning again?
If your wudu breaks during salah, do you carry on and complete it, or stop and then start again? Your namaz has already stopped when your wudu broke, because wudu is a condition for salah. And there are 2 options. If you don't talk to anyone and take the shortest route to the nearest source of water, you can actually come back and finish it. But the preferred option, this is permissible, but the preferred option is to start afresh and read it all over again. Ji.
Let's go with that Vitar question. The sister replied saying, can you read Rabbana Atina?
Yes, you can. You can. You can. In Qunut, you can read another dua. You can read Rabbana Atina. Ji.
Is wearing rings okay for men?
Is wearing rings okay for men? To wear a ring of silver is okay for a man. Nothing besides. Ji. See, on this point, the ring of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said Muhammadur Rasulullah. It said, and it said it in the order for adab. It said Muhammad at the bottom, Rasul above it, and Allah at the top. Reading from the bottom upwards, Muhammadur Rasulullah. And you can actually find images of this today as well. The sort of print of that ring. And it was used as an official seal for the Prophet ﷺ's correspondence. And that's why one opinion is that this should only be used by a person in a similar position, like a qadi. And the other position is that it's permissible to wear otherwise as well, but just one and of silver. And it has a limit in terms of how much silver it can be made of. Ji.
What authoritative tafsir translation would you recommend?
What authoritative tafsir and translation would I recommend? I would recommend, in English, I would recommend Ma'arif al-Quran of Mufti Shafi Uthmani. I think it's very, very good. It takes from a pool of around a dozen tafsir. It has a very good intro as well by Mufti Taqi Uthmani on the sciences of tafsir and of Quran, Quranic sciences, and it goes into sufficient depth to satisfy the avid reader and to fulfill and it's very contemporary. And I would certainly recommend that that everybody has a copy of this. You can download it for free, and you can buy a hard copy as well. Ji.
Can you forgive someone for a crime conditionally? For example, only if they admit the crime publicly?
Can you forgive someone for a crime conditionally? For example, if they admit the crime publicly? Why would you want somebody to admit a crime publicly? So to put a condition on someone which is not permissible is not permissible. So a sin which a person commits and is hidden by Allah, a person commits a sin in the dead of the night and it's hidden by Allah, and then the next day they go and tell people, this person angers Allah. When Allah is concealing their fault, and in Islam it's not permissible for us to expose people in this way, unless it's relating to some dini situation where people would come to harm, or even a dunyawi situation where we're saying don't go to this doctor because he gives fake medicines. Don't, to tell your friend, don't go to this car mechanic because he's putting in faulty parts, whatever it may be. If you're doing this to advise a person to protect them from harm, then it can even become an obligation. Otherwise, it's not permissible. So to tell somebody to admit fault publicly, for what purpose? So that you can make them feel embarrassed, name and shame? It's not permissible. There's no justification for that. If they owe something to you, then you can ask them to pay that off. Otherwise, you need to find it within yourself to forgive them. But no, certainly not. You can't put such condition on them. It's not permissible to oblige a person to expose a sin that they've committed. And nor is it permissible for you. Ji.
This is a long topic, but
Yeah.
Mortgage is clearly haram. Taking the Islamic finance option available in Glasgow, from your understanding, is that fine to use as an option? Any guides would be appreciated.
Right, okay. This whole question about Islamic banking is one which, okay, let me put it like this. The trouble is that anything which is uttered tends to be generalized. So what I suggest to the brother or sister asking is contact us directly and we'll give you the best advice we can based on your circumstances, inshallah. Ji. Because this kind of information can easily be misconstrued, and it's very important to put it into a proper context. Ji.
If a family member is repeatedly causing issues and being toxic, Islam teaches us not to break ties, but when can a person draw the line and break contact?
If a family member is constantly
causing
issues and being toxic, Islam teaches us to maintain family ties, but when can a person draw the line? Subhanallah, this is the beauty of it, isn't it? That you don't choose your own relatives, you choose your own friends. You can make a friendship and break it. You get on with the person and you're friends, and you don't, so you keep a distance. The difference here is that with your relatives, you don't choose them, but you have to maintain a certain level of connection. And on this point, see, severing ties per se, in principle, is not permissible. However, and when people say toxic relationships, well, it's very easy to give a direct answer to that on the assumption that this may be the case. But nothing is often that simple. Sometimes it's small issues which we allow to sort of fester in our hearts and minds until we develop so much negativity about another human being that we don't like the sight of them. It doesn't have to be like that. So in due proportion, number one. Number two, see, maintaining ties doesn't mean that you're always next to each other. It can be an occasional salam. Don't stop doing salam. And on important occasions where you might want to congratulate them, or you might want to give them condolences, as far as this is possible, do so. And I'll mention 2 points here. Look, let me give you an example. You're talking about personal hurt, aren't you? That's what, in Arabic, there's a saying, al-aqarib kal-aqarib, that relatives can be like scorpions, right? So sometimes people have a very difficult time. Look at Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. And this should be enough to inspire us. Sayyidina Aisha radiyallahu anha, the Prophet's dear wife and our beloved mother, is accused by the hypocrites. And the whole sort of scandalous accusation that is mentioned in Surah An-Nur. And Allah Ta'ala reveals her innocence. Now this caused untold pain to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to Aisha radiyallahu anha. Her tears dried up. She cried constantly for days. And to her father, her dear father, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. Now, one of the people who had been implicated in listening to rumors and then spreading them, false rumors, was a person who Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu was giving financial support to. And when he learned that he was also involved, he took an oath, I'm not going to give him anything from today. Allah Azza wa Jal revealed a verse in the Quran that وَلَا يَأْتَلِ أُولُو الْفَضْلِ مِنْكُمْ, the people of virtue amongst you and wealth, the people of virtue should never take an oath that they won't do an act of goodness. Don't you want Allah to forgive you? Don't you love for Allah to forgive you? أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ? And Siddiq radiyallahu anhu says, Bala, oh Allah, I do love that you forgive me. And he immediately, he conceded, and he immediately began to spend and give the financial support to this person who had caused him pain, and he forgave him. So we need to have a bigger heart. From our Mashayikh, Shaykh Zakaria rahimahullah, he would visit his relatives in his hometown, Kandala, and he would sit in each house for 15 minutes. And there were some relatives from those families, he writes in his autobiography, that they didn't get on amongst themselves, this family with this one. So he'd visit one family, and he'd have just been to the other one, because he'd visit them all. So they would say to him, you don't often come, as a complaint, as a taunt. You don't often come, and when you come, you still don't have any time. You only come here for 15 minutes. So this was a bit of a taunt. And he says what they were really implying is, when you come, rather than spending 15 minutes in that house, you should give all that time to us. Why are you going there? But he would still go. And he went to a relative's house, and the relative didn't even turn to do salam to him. And the person who was traveling with the Shaykh says, Shaykh, why do you even bother? Shaykh is putting his hand on his shoulder and saying salam. He won't even turn his head. And Shaykh says, well, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. If he wants to be like that, then be like that. And how will Allah reward you? If you want to be wealthy and have a long life, and you want to have a positive reputation, and sort of the word izzat, because of which you don't talk to somebody, well, Allah will give it to you if you do talk to them. So learn to swallow things. Now this doesn't mean that you're constantly, as we say in Urdu, baghal mein, you're always sort of in the lap. You don't have to be close to relatives who you don't get on with. But to maintain a certain minimum amount is something we ought to do. So drawing the line might mean that you're not as frequent in your visits and you don't interact in the same way. But to completely write somebody off is more related to, as I say, Asian movies don't even come to my janazah than it is to Islam. It shouldn't be done. Ji.
What fiqh books written in Arabic would you recommend?
Which Arabic fiqh books would I recommend? Well, it depends. Sorry, for?
Beginners.
For beginners?
Yes.
Okay. It depends, doesn't it? To recommend, I can talk about the classical fiqh mutun of Hanafi fiqh. It depends on the reader, what is his persuasion in fiqh. Is he a Hanafi or a Shafi'i or a Maliki or a Hanbali? The Hanafi classic fiqh texts, the one on Ibadah, which is very useful, is Nurul Ida with its commentary, Maraqi al-Falah and Hashiyat al-Tahtawiyya, and then we have the Mukhtasar of Imam Quduri with its commentary, and then we have Kanzul Daqaiq of Imam Nasafi, and then we have Sharh al-Wiqaya, and then we have Hidayah. So all of these. So for the beginner, you tend to need a teacher for something like this. That's what I would say. So find a tutor and then choose anyone with mutual, and then go through it with a tutor. And inshallah, it will be of immense benefit. Let me mention here, fiqh is a sacred knowledge. It is the quintessence and cream of the Quran and Sunnah, coded and codified into simple steps so that you can do everything according to the Quran and Sunnah. It brings together the Quran, the Hadith, and the Ijma' of the Ummah, and where there's no clear instruction, the Ijtihad of the Ummah too. So it's an undervalued, underestimated source of knowledge which we ought to turn to. Gee.
What is the view of keeping a dog inside, and is it allowed?
What is the view of keeping a dog inside, presumably inside the house, and is it allowed? In Islam, it's not recommended. The hadith mentions that the angels of Rahmah don't come into such a household. Another reason is it can be annoying for the neighbors. So no, you wouldn't. And then the saliva, according to Hanafi fiqh at least, is a source of impurity. So on occasion, the Jibreel alayhi salam didn't appear in the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The narration says that a dog had wandered in. So this is something which, if you're a farmer and you want to keep a sheepdog, that's allowed. You want to keep a hunting dog, that's allowed, but in the house it's not recommended in Islam. And this doesn't mean the dogs are looked down upon. Let us not confuse the 2 points. If anything, the Quran praises the educated dog, and that's the word, the trained dog, the hunting dog, and the hunting animal, and the hunt which it brings down upon the instruction of the master is halal to eat if it's released with Bismillah. Under the specific conditions. So this doesn't mean that we look down upon dogs per se. We don't look down upon any of Allah's creation, and dogs have their positive attributes. The Mashayikh have mentioned so many qualities of dogs that are not even found in some of the better people. The very best hardly achieve. It's something which we would have to work hard to. The loyalty that's found in a dog, for example. Towards its master. Our master is our Lord, our Creator. So there's so much to learn. So this isn't about looking down on the creature. It's not at all. But the point is that do we keep a dog in our house? No, this isn't something which is taught in Islam. Ji.
Melissa, we've got lots of questions.
Ji.
We're running out of time.
Yep.
So we've got 6-7 questions on zakat.
Okay. Zakat questions, inshallah, we'll devote some time to zakat specifically tomorrow, because it's the time of the year when people need their answers on this subject, and we'll try and go over some of the basic principles with you as well, inshallah.
This is the last question.
Yeah.
Others will cover tomorrow as well. And so
Yeah.
one is, we realise now it is important to go to the mosque because of the situation we're in. Can you also confirm why it's important to go to the mosque?
We realize now that it's important to come to the masjid because of the situation we're in. Can you also confirm why it's important? Subhanallah, where do we start and where do we end? The Anbiya alayhimus salam, it's their sunnah to build masjids. Why? As centers of ibadah and tawheed. The Kaaba, who was it built by? There are various narrations. Ibn Kathir mentions many of those narrations. Shaykh Zakaria rahimahullah has written a detailed part in his Awjaz on the Kaaba. Some narrations suggest that it was initially built by angels, then by Adam alayhi salam, then by his son Shis alayhi salam. Through the centuries, it was raised into the heavens during the flood, Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. Fast forward, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam, and then they had their hand in it. We're talking about the names of prophets. There are others, but we're talking about prophets. So Adam and his son, the angels not being prophets, but the angels, Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail salam rebuilding on the same foundation as where it was before, and then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam participating when it's being refurbished in Mecca. So, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam building Masjid al-Nabawi al-Sharif and participating in the construction of the Masjid of Quba, the first masjid, the earliest one to be constructed in this ummah. And Sulaiman alayhi salam and Dawood alayhi salam's involvement in the construction of Baytul Maqdis, Ishaq alayhi salam. So this is the work of Anbiya. And why do they build this? They build these masajid, these centers for the ummah. And as we can see the significance of Baytul Maqdis, the significance of Makkah, Masjid al-Haram, Masjid al-Nabawi al-Sharif, may Allah preserve these masajid. So what can we say? The virtue of performing salah in the masjid is far superior to performing salah in the house. A person who comes to the masjid is a guest of Allah Azza wa Jal. These are places where the angels abide, they come in large numbers. So they're centers of hidayah. The Kaaba, هدى للناس أول بيت وضع للناس للذي ببكة مباركا وهدى للعالمين, a source of barakah and a source of hidayah. And by extension, any masjid which is connected to the Kaaba, and they all are, is a source of barakah and hidayah. So there are so many reasons our hearts ought to be connected to the masajid. And yes, absolutely, when Allah gives us the opportunity, let us all make a pledge that we will, inshallah, spend more time in the masajid, and we ought to make dua as well. You know, I say this again, the apparent circumstances in the dunya and the apparent asbab are there. That's all there. The efforts that are being made around the world with reference to this virus and so forth, but the dua is also there. And ultimately the decisions are taken by the master. What happens on earth is a consequence of what is decreed. So keep your duas up, inshallah, and keep us in your duas too. Ji. May Allah accept. And until next time, wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Allah accept anything which we've said of benefit and forgive our mistakes. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun.